Hi there, and welcome back to an introduction to biblical counseling. This is lesson number 6, and in this video, we are going to talk about a broken cup. In our last video, we learned the first step in our counseling process model. That step is create hope. And the image we have for hope is an open door. In this video, we are going to learn step 2 of this process model. Step 2 is going to be all about a broken cup. This cup has white sheep and one black sheep, and that is what's on the cup. But if you ask me, that's not what's special about this cup. What's really important to me is who gave me this cup and why I've kept it. But the only way you're going to know why I have kept this cup is if you ask me. So come along and let's see what we can learn today about step 2. Here we are again with our 5 steps of our process model. In our last video, we discussed step 1. But in this video, we're going to discuss step 2. In step 2, we have the image of a broken cup, but that broken cup means that we are going to learn and understand. When somebody is in the middle of a problem, we need to learn and understand. To do this, you must learn all you can about the entire situation, including information about the person's heart and motives. You're going to need to learn the following information. What is the bad fruit? What was the situation that produced this fruit? After you begin to understand the fruit and the roots, then you must understand what you've learned. This is an additional step. It's not just the facts that matter, but how do the facts fit together? What is the story that they tell? And it's really important that we begin to understand the story happening in a person's life. We organize the information so that it begins to make sense both to ourselves and the other person. For example, you are going to need to understand motivations and desires. Often, we don't even know what our own motivations or desires are. The person we're speaking to is going to be in a similar situation. It's not enough just to ask, what are the motivations that you have to make bad fruit choices? That isn't going to yield us a lot of information. We need to ask questions. These questions will then hopefully begin to help us understand what motivates the person to make the bad fruit choices. We also can learn, what is the person valuing while they're in the heat situation? And we can learn what might be a bad route. All of these things take time. They're all things that we need to learn and understand. Remember, as you are gathering information and trying to learn and understand, you are going to find out what is happening inside of someone's heart in 3 different areas that make up the human heart. Those areas are our beliefs, our desires, and our choices. We've discussed all 3 in a previous video. What's really important to remember is that they interact with each other. What we believe to be true will influence what we want, what we desire. What we desire is going to influence our choices, what we actually choose to do. And the more we choose to do something, the more we're going to believe that is a good choice for us. All of these aspects interconnect with one another. The human is a very complicated being, and that is because God has made us this way. So to remember the step of learn and understand, I just want you to think about a broken cup. I showed you my own broken cup, and if you were to ask me some questions, you would find out that a special friend I haven't seen in many years gave this to me. Because she lives so far away, I keep this cup as a reminder of that time that I had with her and the way that she showed me the love of Christ. But one day, the cup fell. And when it did, it broke. Didn't break a lot, but it broke enough that it's not the best cup to use in my house. However, I hold on to it because of the meaning and the story that's behind it. When we meet with counselees, we wait until they open the door. We discussed that there are entry gates. So not only can we have a door, but some of us have a wall around our home, and that wall or that fence has an entry gate. The only way to be allowed in a friendly manner is if a person comes through that gate and is welcomed. Likewise, when we meet with counselees, we wait until they say, "Come in." So we walk in and we sit with them as far inside their home as they will allow us. Once they invite us into their home, they kindly offer us a cup of chai. They give you a cup and they take a cup themselves. And as they're drinking, you notice their cup is broken. Something about their cup isn't quite right. Why is it that they are drinking from this cup? What is the story behind it? We ask our friends questions, and those questions help us learn about the situation. It's not enough just to see that the cup is broken. Other people can see the cup is broken, but how many will stop and listen and hear the story about the broken places and what has caused them? That's what we're doing in the counseling process. We are pausing and we are paying attention to the person in front of us so that we can understand the source of their broken places and how to orient the heart back to Jesus so that they can begin to have more comfort and more healing and more victory in their lives. How do we learn the facts about a person or a situation? People are a lot more complicated than broken cups. Well, what we do is we ask a lot of questions. And then after we've asked questions, we ask more. Do not assume you know anything. And then we need to listen. Is it biblical to listen carefully to all the facts? It's absolutely biblical. There are 2 points here that are really helpful. The first one is to answer before listening. That is folly and shame. Proverbs 18:17. In a lawsuit, the first to speak seems right until someone else comes forward. This is a really important point, especially when there is conflict in relationships. The first person in a marital conflict may seem obviously in the right, but we need to make sure we listen to the second person and pay attention to all the information. We need to make sure that we are asking good questions. We must ask open-ended questions. These are questions that cannot be answered with yes or no. Some examples: what's happening at your home? How is the situation at your home affecting you? How would you describe the problem? What's troubling you about the situation? To you, that may seem obvious, but each person is going to experience things a little bit differently. We need to make sure we ask what is troubling the person. There are some additional options there. There are numerous ways to ask open-ended questions. These are just some ideas to get you started. When you ask different types of questions, you're going to get information that is specific to the word that the sentence starts with. So if you ask a question that starts with the word what, you're going to find out what happened in a situation. But if you ask a question that starts with the word why, you're going to uncover what somebody's purposes or desires or goals are. Be very cautious with asking the question why, because when people hear a why question, such as, "Why did you do that?" we often feel defensive. Sometimes a better option is, "What were the reasons that you did that?" A how question can assist you to better understand the nature of a situation. For example, if a wife tells you that her husband was very upset with her and that they got into an argument, you could ask, how did he sound when he spoke to you? That's going to help you understand how loud was he? How quiet was he? That's going to help you understand the nature of the argument. How often questions, how many, where, these are all important clarifying questions that will assist you to understand how wide the problem is. For example, if someone tells you that they are struggling with pornography, for example, if someone tells you they are struggling with pornography and they bring you on board to help them overcome this issue, you're going to need to know how often they're viewing pornography. Now, that might seem like a really personal question, and it is, but you really do need to understand the scope of a situation so that you can help. Where are you when you view it? If somebody is always in the same place, that will tell you that perhaps you need to help them avoid that location or that time of day. If you realize that somebody watches pornography once a week and you find out that there's a pattern to it, that will help you better help that person to understand the situation that they are in. You're going to want to ask the same question, but in different parts of a person's life. If a person is feeling out of control in one area of their life, you're going to want to find out if they're out of control in other areas of their life. The problem is not the problem is the heart. So if somebody is struggling with anger in their home life, you're going to want to find out if they're also struggling with anger in their work life or in other situations. There's a strong likelihood that they are, but you're not going to find out unless you ask. The individual who is struggling with anger likely does not even realize that this anger is coming out in multiple areas of their life. So when you ask the questions to learn, both yourself and that person begin to understand the scope of the problem. Likewise, you want to ask focused questions. Focused questions go deep into one area to uncover the roots. So if someone is angry at their child, you can ask them, when you are angry with your child, what do you think God thinks about what you're doing? Actually, a really important question, because what we think about God and how we think He sees us is incredibly important. I've given you some other questions to help you go deeper into a person's life, but I do want to point out that I ask God questions. Many of my questions are not God questions, but let's make sure that we don't leave out the God questions. The purpose of asking these questions is not to teach, but to understand the person's perspective. Again, I'm trying to learn and understand all I can about that broken cup. Good questions will move progressively from the person's situation to the person's behavior to the person's hearts. Or another language that we have been using, from the heat situation to the bad fruits to the bad roots. So we ask, what is happening in the situation? As we begin to understand the situation better, we begin to understand what the person's behavior is. So we ask questions about the behavior. What did you do in this situation? Then, as we begin to better understand what is growing on that tree, we ask questions about what is driving that behavior. As we begin to understand what the fruit is, we will have a better idea of what the roots are. We find out by asking questions and listening. My friends, make sure that you remember God in the process. The point of biblical counseling is to reconnect people, to reorient people to the one who made them and the one who can give them hope in life. Our thoughts, feelings, choices about God are our most important ones. Does the person you are speaking with have a relationship with Christ? If the person has a relationship with Christ, then you could help them grow. But if they don't have a relationship with Christ, trying to help them bear good fruit for God without having their root structure transformed through the process of justification, of being born again, will be ultimately a fruitless effort. Whether a person is a believer or not a believer, you're going to want to know what they think about God. You're going to want to know, in this heat situation, has what they think about God changed? And you want to know what the person believes God thinks about him. It will be impossible to skillfully take the next step of counseling if you aren't in the process of understanding how this person is experiencing the one who made them, Jesus Christ. Now, I know I told you there's step 1 and step 2, but these are not steps that just go in a row. Learning and understanding is necessary for every counseling session. Step 2, learning and understanding a broken cup, is not a one-time activity. You regularly need to ask good questions, to listen so that you can learn and understand. Once you begin to get that information, you can take it and put it in a 3 trees diagram. This can help you better understand. Let's have some practice time in a case study. Your 24-year-old cousin Robert shares a home with you. He is a youth leader in your church and a singer. Next year, he plans to enroll in Bible school. Your family members are excited for him to become a pastor. Last week, you came home unexpectedly. You were confused and surprised to see Robert watching pornography on his laptop. He quickly shut his laptop and you didn't talk about it. You just didn't know what to do. But today, Robert asked if he could talk with you. He tells you he's glad you found out he was watching pornography. He wants to stop, but doesn't know how. He asks you to help him. What do you do to help Robert? This is definitely a situation where you don't want to have opposite sex having these conversations together. However, as a family member and for the sake of learning, we're going to go ahead with this case study. So how do you help Robert? The first step we learned in the last video was to create hope. Robert has been struggling with pornography for a while, and he's finally asking for help, but it's only because he was caught. Robert is probably not very hopeful, or at least hasn't been hopeful, that he could overcome this. Perhaps he's promised himself that he would never do it again. We need to create hope. Some of the ways we mentioned in the last video is to be sure that we are listening, to be present, to not condemn Robert, and to pray a hope-filled prayer. All of these can be helpful at the beginning of a counseling or a discipleship process. One of the things that Robert has likely been experiencing has been condemnation. He's had a lot of shame. So Robert's been caught and he's now confessed. He knows that it's wrong. Likely, he doesn't know why it's wrong other than it's a sin. You're going to help him come to terms with that so that his heart reorients to Christ. Right now, you need to be a good listener. Now is not the time to be shocked at the things Robert tells you. Even if internally you are surprised, you need to try to keep your face normal so that you can just listen to him and he does not feel attacked or condemned. As soon as he feels condemned, he is going to shut that door and walk out. What will happen next? By our choice to condemn him, Robert will likely not get the help that he needs. When we choose to listen and to be patient and to be kind and to live like Christ in front of Robert, then Robert has a much better chance of having victory over this issue in his life. Another thing that we want to do for Robert is we want to pray for him, but we want to pray a hope-filled prayer. We pray for Robert in such a way that Robert hears us express our confidence that God is the God who changes us. Robert needs to know that there's hope for him. In step 2, we've been discussing how we need to learn and understand the situation. To learn and understand, we need to ask questions. Now, you may not at first think that this is hopeful and that it would help Robert, but asking questions is incredibly helpful. In John chapter 3, verse 20, Jesus says that everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But those who love the light will bring their deeds into the light. So by asking Robert questions, you are giving him an opportunity to expose what he's been doing so that he is no longer living underneath the shadow of the evil. Instead, as the evil is brought into the light, light has the ability to take power over the darkness. So we're going to want to ask Robert questions that will help us understand his situation, how long he has been struggling with pornography, what has he tried to stop his addiction? Has he ever told anybody before? What did that person do to help? Or what did they do to hurt? What is his fear of telling you? As Robert sees that you are a trustworthy person and you're not overwhelmed by his issue, he is going to have hope grow in him. Finally, there can be freedom over this dark thing that's been holding him. As you ask these questions, you are going to want to understand the situation, heat that he's in. You're going to want to understand the bad fruit that he is expressing, and certainly it is impacting his relationship with God. Remember, Robert is in the process of becoming a pastor. He is a leader at your church, so you really do want to step in and help him right now. From the bad fruit, you are going to want to understand the bad root. You might just say, obviously, it's lust, but it isn't obvious. We don't know why Robert's looking at pornography. It may have less to do with lust and more to do with his desire for control. It may have less to do with sexual lust and more to do with a heart that is really angry and ungrateful and discontent. You aren't going to know unless you ask the questions. I've drawn the 3 trees diagram because I want to show you how we can take the information that we find out about Robert and how we can put it into this diagram and reach a better understanding of what might be going on inside of Robert. Because remember, the problem isn't the problem is the heart, but we're not going to know what this heart is until we better understand the problem, because fruit and root always match. So over here, we have a mango tree. We can be confident that the roots of a mango tree are going to be mango roots. But what we don't know from Robert's situation is what are the fruits and what the roots are. In this situation, the heat is that Robert was caught looking at pornography. Now, the heat isn't that Robert is looking at pornography. The heat is actually that he was caught. because we don't know yet if Robert is sincere about changing. Did he come to talk to you because he's embarrassed and ashamed and he wanted to let you know that he wants to fix this problem? Or is he sincere and he hasn't known what to do and he really wants you to help him? In this situation, what is some of the bad fruit? And we're only going to know if we ask him. So yes, one of the bad fruits is the obvious one. It's going to be looking at pornography. In our marriage videos, we are going to briefly discuss why pornography is sinful. It is sinful for married people to watch pornography, and it's sinful for single people to watch pornography. When somebody watches pornography, they're looking at a person who was not their husband or wife, and they're looking at that person do things that is only meant for married people. So in this situation, we know for sure what Robert is doing is sinful. As we ask Robert questions, we might find out that he is very worried. He's worried that you're going to tell somebody at the church. So what we see is that Robert has a lot of shame. He also has fear. As you ask him questions, some of these fruits become obvious, but we might also see a fruit over here where we learn that Robert desires to change. And again, we have to consider this mixed fruit idea where we can have a tree that has both good fruits and bad fruits on it. So Robert has a desire to change, but yet he's really fearful. What you need to do is to ask the questions, begin to understand what is at the root issue. Struggling through an issue such as pornography is not an easy problem to just discuss via a video like this. But I wanted to use this topic as an example because it's so common in our churches. It's a secret sin that is happening in many people's lives. I'm going to use this case study of Robert in subsequent videos. However, I'm never going to have an exact solution for Robert because counseling is something that is done relationally. How does Robert respond to the things that somebody is asking? How does he respond to the help that you're offering him? How is he responding to the Holy Spirit? But I hope that it will help you consider different ways that you can help real people, whether it be the issue of pornography or it be something very, very different. The really good news is the problem isn't pornography. And the really good news is for a different person, the problem isn't drinking too much alcohol and getting drunk. In both situations, the problem is deeper. It's down in the human heart. What is it in the heat situation that leads Robert to seek out pornography, but would lead another person to seek out alcohol and would lead a third person to not sin and instead praise God? The problem is how our human heart is interacting with the heat situation and how that then comes out in our behavior. May God mercifully change our hearts so that they seek after him.